BASSSF. Welcome, friends, to our brand exploration introduction video for BASSSF, which stands for
Building a Squarespace Site from start to finish.
Wow,
I don't
that
know.
was a good assist.
Yeah. I really give you a hard time about the acronyms,
But
they do stick in your head,
Yeah.
and my brain did go do.
Also, I'm just hoping everyone at home can be walking around being like, I'm really enjoying this BASSSF series.
Yeah,
you know?
it's true. It
This
gives you-
BASSSF series is really
Well,
exciting.
it's definitely shorter than Building a Squarespace
Yeah.
Site from start to finish.
Okay, so what are people about to watch? You're going to show them your screen. You've recorded a bunch of stuff. It's really, I watched it back already myself, and it was
Learned a
fun.
couple of tidbits.
I did learn a couple
I
things.
heard you watching the cut of it and going, oh.
Yeah, the
woo.
Pinterest search for me. It always,
Okay.
I always forget about Pinterest
You're
in
teasing.
itself. I know, but I just like that was the one for me that really stood out. So anyway, what are people about to watch?
So what you're gonna see in this video is the very beginning of this process. Before I even create the website that we're gonna do in this entire video series, I needed to create some type of fictional brand to know who I was building the website for. So you are gonna see in this video, it's a little bit different than my normal design process, but you are gonna see me get some color inspiration, go searching for inspiration images on Pinterest, and ultimately at the end of this video, you are gonna see me create a mood board or an inspiration board along with 5 tone words for this fictional brand that I'm creating.
And this is a process that you've honed over the years. I remember when you first started doing this with clients when you had a design business, and you turned it into a course, which was Better Branding course, and then now you're kind of using it and showing it kind of in a like hyper speed here for people to see, which is really fun.
Not to mention, you'll also see me use one of my absolute favorite new design tools, Adobe XD, which I don't have any other blog posts or anything like that on how Adobe XD has now worked into my workflow. So you're gonna get to see that for the first time as well.
Yep, and if you're curious where this video kind of stops and what's gonna be next, if you wait to the end, you'll see a preview of the next part of this series. This BASSSF series is gonna have a couple videos as we build this entire site. And if you're interested, we are going to be selling the site and the brand at the end in a very unique way. So make sure to go to wanderingaimfully.com/newsletter, sign up. That will be where we announce that it is for sale with the unique way that we're selling it. So
And now, enjoy the video. Let's get started.
here we go.
All right, guys, just a quick note here before we begin. Normally, I would, of course, build this website and brand based off of the personality of my client, and we would go through my brand story process to determine things like their ideal client and brand tone words. But since I don't have a client for this project, I get to just kind of make up the personality of the brand to base my design off of, and so that's why for this particular process, I actually decided to start with color as my inspiration point. So the first thing I did is I went over to this Instagram account called Awesome Color. I follow them, and it's just fun color palettes. And what I like about it is a lot of these are unique color palettes that I wouldn't typically dream up on my own. So the first thing I decided to do was just literally go through their grid and see which color palettes stood out to me as interesting or unique. The other thing I was kind of looking for here was something that was somewhat gender neutral. So what I mean by that is just if I had a bunch of colors that were traditionally associated with being more feminine energy, or a bunch of colors that were traditionally associated with masculine energy, that could make my end website result kind of pigeonholed into just one specific gender or one specific brand feeling. And so instead, my goal was to go with something that felt balanced. So from here, I just picked a couple of color palettes that stood out to me, 3 to be exact, and I went over to my design program of choice called Adobe XD. I love designing in XD. I think it's actually supposed to be for kind of interface design and interaction design for UI and UX and things like that. But I just love that it's this hybrid between Illustrator and Photoshop, and it's really easy to play around with. So I just started a new document, and this is a little artboard here. And these are the 3 color palettes that initially stood out to me as just being interesting, kind of unexpected, and somewhat gender balanced. From here, the one that spoke to me the most was actually this one. Mainly because this hunter green color is something that I've never used in my work before, and I've seen it pop up. It's, I don't want to say trendy, but I just think it's interesting and of the moment, and I want to play around with that. So the only thing I didn't love about this color palette was just something about the starkness of this red hue. Just was like a little bit too loud for me and felt like it was throwing off the balance of this, and so I wanted to play around with maybe tweaking this, but this was a good starting off point for me. So using this hunter green color as my inspiration, I actually went to Pinterest and I think I might have even typed in just hunter green in my search and looked for any images that could give me some more color inspiration. And what I found was this image. I liked the font, I liked the boldness, and it had this hunter green paired with this light pink, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Not something that you see too often, so I played around with replacing this red color with this sort of mauvey pink color, and that felt a little bit more balanced to me, but still unique and interesting, which is what I loved about the color palette in general. So that was a good starting off place, and I thought, okay, this is going to be my inspiration point. At that point, I decided to just start a brand new board with those two elements on it so that I could build out some more inspiration from there. I like this process because it kind of gives you some breadcrumbs as far as where you started and where you ended up. So I don't really like to delete things. I just like to create fresh new artboards whenever I feel like I'm at a place where I have a new starting point. Okay, so from here I wanted to build out this color palette even more. I like a nice variety of colors to choose from. That's just my design style. Some people like to keep their palette really streamlined. I like kind of the more the merrier, things to mix and match. So I started with this pin on Pinterest and I looked for more color inspiration that could kind of play with this family nicely. And what I found was this second poster in this sort of family that felt related to this, but I saw them next to each other and I thought, oh, I really like the color story that's happening here. We've got the hunter green, the pink, and then this cool coral color. But if you'll notice, this pink is quite a bit more, it's a little lighter and a little bit more saturated than this darker mauve color. And I really liked that. I felt like this palette was getting a little bit too kind of muted for my taste. You guys know I like color. So instead I played around with replacing it with this lighter pink. And it kind of brought a little bit more life and quirkiness to the palette, which I really liked. So that was a good starting off point. And then also this coral color. So I thought, okay, I'll maybe replace this kind of orangey version and replace it with something that's a little bit more pink and coral, since they occupy a little bit of the same space there. And I was really liking the direction of that. So then I went hunting for more inspiration images over on Pinterest, and I found these two, which kind of spoke to the palette. We've got the hunter green here with already this coral and the light pink that we've kind of have represented in these tones here, which I liked. But then over in this image, I really loved the kind of organic shape of these blobs here, but then this mustardy color that stood out to me. I think I originally picked up this image because the parchment color background with the green was already represented in the palette. But then, like I said, this mustard color felt interesting and again, kind of the moment, and I wanted to play around with that. So I decided to add that as well as a sort of light tan version of that color to the palette as well. And it felt like it was really starting to build out this nice library of colors to play with. I also found these two images in my search that just started to feel like I was now evoking an emotion and a tone, which was the entire purpose of this, was to try to come up with those 5 tone words. So the second that I reached this place where I kind of felt like I had a palette and I had some images, my brain was definitely going to this type of feeling and type of tone, which is the point where I thought, okay, now I can start to build a mood board based off of these things. So I started an entirely new art board for that. And I've changed my style of mood board over the years. Sometimes I like a lot of images overlapping and layered. Sometimes I like just this grid aspect to it, but right now this is kind of the layout that I'm going with. So I put my palette here, and then I have all of my squares here, and I filled in these squares with a couple of the images that I felt from this grouping that I wanted to include on the mood board. This was actually left over from another design document that I had that I was kind of working with a client previously on their website, and it never turned into anything. But I felt like, oh, what do you know? There are some of the colors from the palette represented, and then I also liked this addition of this sort of grayish blue color, so I included that in the palette as well. Just to show you some technical tips on how I get these images dropped into the squares, you can do 2 things. The first way is that you can quite literally just drop an image from Pinterest into this square shape, and it will basically take on the shape of that. So this, add that here. And if you double click on it now, you can kind of shift it to the section that you want. And there you go, it's in that shape. So that's one way that you can do that. The other way is that you can create a mask using, let's say I wanted to use one of these images that I already have on my board here. So I'm going to copy that from that artboard and paste it into this one. And maybe I want it on top of this shape here. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that they're in the same group over here in my layers. So I'm going to move this over here. And I'm going to select both of these so I can see now which image it is on my list of layers. And then if you click Command G, it'll automatically group those items together. So now I've got my square and I want that square to be on top of the image. And all I have to do is have those things highlighted and then use Command Shift M, which creates a mask group. And what's cool about that is that you can just double click inside the mask and you can shift around the shape. You can transform it so that you get whatever aspect of it that you want. And then once I click off of it, it's still in that mask. So those are the two ways that I get these like perfect little squares. So now it's just a matter of finding on Pinterest these inspiration images that I felt represented this color palette. And then the tone words kind of emerged from there. So the tone words that I ended up going with were creative, organic, quirky, bold, and refined. And I will show you the finished mood board right here. Like I said, it was really fun because I didn't have a specific person or business to pull from. I wanted the tone words to come from somewhere. So using the color inspiration as my jumping off point, it was definitely this very organic process with picking colors that I liked, mixed with images that I found inspiring, and then really building out these tone words. And what I love about it is I always like there to be some variation and some type of push and pull with tone words. So you wouldn't typically think of a brand to be both quirky and refined, but I really love that design challenge because what I've learned from working with clients in the past is rarely is anyone just one thing. Like they're usually a mix of these sometimes competing personality traits, and I love the challenge of having to represent that in a design so that they feel totally authentically represented. So they're not just refined, but they're also quirky and creative and also organic and bold. And so I love the mix of these different words. So that felt somewhat related to a challenge that I might actually have and somewhat related to somebody out there who might really benefit from this end website design because they might see themselves as those different things and wanting their brand to represent those different things. So I felt tremendously inspired by this board and all of the different directions that I could take this quote unquote brand before we even get to the website stage. And my next step from here would be just to start to develop some of the brand elements. So what fonts do I want to use? I already have my color palette here. And the biggest thing to me is what graphic elements that I want to use in the brand because I use those a lot in website design to make a website feel unique and branded and custom. So that is my next step after this mood board.